When I purchased my 3-acre property at the edge of Willowbrook Estates 5 years ago, the natural pond and small earthen dam were what sold me on the place. The previous owner, an engineer with a passion for hydrology, had carefully constructed the dam to manage seasonal flooding from the creek that ran through our community. The water feature created a serene backdrop to my modest farmhouse-style home, attracting herons, ducks, and even the occasional deer. Willowbrook Estates seemed perfect at first: manicured lawns, friendly neighbors, and community events every month. The HOA fees were steep at $450 monthly, but the amenities appeared worth it: a community pool, tennis courts, and well-maintained common areas. During the first homeowners meeting I attended, I met Diane Harrington, the HOA president for the past 8 years. She greeted me with a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "We're so delighted to have you join our little paradise," she said, handing me a 3-ring binder. "This is our community handbook. I suggest you read it cover to cover. We take our guidelines very seriously here." The binder contained 237 pages of rules, bylaws, and regulations. Fence heights were restricted to exactly 48 inches. Holiday decorations could only be displayed 14 days before and must be removed within 24 hours after the holiday. Trash bins couldn't be visible from the street except between 5 p.m. the day before collection and 8 p.m. on collection day. My first warning came 3 weeks after moving in. A bright yellow notice appeared on my door regarding unauthorized landscape modifications. Apparently, the previous owner's dam and pond had never been officially approved by the Architectural Review Committee, despite having existed for over 15 years. According to the notice, I needed to submit formal plans and obtain approval, or face potential fines of $100 per day. When I called to explain that these features predated my ownership, the HOA administrator simply repeated the regulation number from the handbook. "Rules are rules, Mr. Reynolds. Diane is very particular about water features. You'll need committee approval." As I hung up, I noticed Diane herself driving slowly past my property in her white Lexus SUV, neck craned to inspect my violation. I didn't know it then, but this would be the first skirmish in a war that would eventually engulf our entire community. The application for my unauthorized water feature cost $250 in non-refundable review fees. I submitted detailed engineering plans showing how the dam actually protected properties downstream by controlling water flow during heavy rains, something our area experienced several times a year. The small dam created a retention pond that slowly released water rather than allowing flash flooding. 3 weeks later, my application was denied. The letter, bearing Diane's flourishing signature, cited aesthetic inconsistency with community standards and potential liability concerns. I was ordered to remove the dam within 30 days or face escalating fines. I requested a hearing before the board, which was granted for the following month. In the meantime, I received 2 more violation notices, one for excessive wildlife attraction, the ducks that visited my pond, and another for unauthorized vegetation, the natural cattails and water plants that helped filter the pond water. At the hearing, I brought documentation from the County Water Management Office confirming that my dam served a practical purpose for flood control. I even brought photos from before my purchase showing the feature had existed for years. "While we appreciate your thoroughness, Mr. Reynolds," Diane said with that same tight smile, "the fact remains that no HOA approval was ever granted for this feature. Previous board oversights don't constitute permission." Greg Chambers, the treasurer, a balding man with perpetually sweaty palms, nodded vigorously. "Besides, water features increase our insurance premiums. We simply can't allow individual homeowners to create potential liabilities." When I pointed out that several board members, including Diane herself, had decorative fountains and small ponds, she dismissed the comparison. "Those are approved aesthetic features, not unauthorized dams affecting community drainage," she replied coolly. "The board's decision stands. Remove the dam or face fines beginning at $100 per day, doubling every 30 days thereafter." As I left the clubhouse, my neighbor Martha Stevens whispered, "Don't take it personally. Diane's had her eye on your property since it went up for sale. She tried to buy it for her daughter but couldn't match your offer. The pieces started falling into place. This wasn't about rules. It was about revenge. The fines began accumulating immediately. By the end of the first month, I owed $3,000, and the HOA sent notice that they would place a lien on my property if I didn't comply. I consulted a lawyer who specialized in property disputes, but his news wasn't encouraging. Unfortunately, they're within their rights to enforce architectural standards, he explained. The fact that the previous owner never got approval doesn't help your case. Your best option might be to comply and then work through proper channels to reinstate something similar. I decided to get a second opinion from an engineering firm about what removing the dam might actually mean for the neighborhood. The report was concerning. The dam had been controlling water flow from the creek for years, and removing it could potentially cause significant flooding downstream during heavy rains. When I shared this information with the HOA board via email, Diane responded dismissively. Our landscaping committee has reviewed the matter and determined no significant impact. Your continued non-compliance will result in further penalties. Meanwhile, Martha and several other neighbors had begun expressing concern. Their properties lay downstream from mine, and they understood the protection the dam provided. Trevor Williams, whose backyard bordered the creek just downstream from my property, joined me in pleading with the board. I've lived here 12 years, and that dam has prevented my yard from flooding at least half a dozen times. Trevor argued at the next board meeting. Maybe we should have an independent assessment before forcing its removal. Diane's face hardened. This matter has been decided, Mr. Williams. Perhaps you should be more concerned with your own violations. The following week, Trevor received notices about his non-compliant mailbox post and excessive shade plants in the front yard. The message was clear: stand with me, and you'll become a target too. Despite this, a small coalition of neighbors formed. We started researching the history of flooding in the area before the dam was built. County records showed several significant incidents that had damaged homes now protected by my little earthen structure. We compiled a report and submitted it to the board, requesting another hearing. The response came not as a hearing date, but as a certified letter stating that the HOA would be taking direct action to remedy my continued non-compliance. They would remove the dam themselves and bill me for all expenses, plus the accumulated fines. I called my lawyer immediately, but before he could file an emergency injunction, I woke to the sound of heavy machinery on my property. At 7:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, I rushed outside in my bathrobe to find a backhoe operator tearing into my dam. Diane stood nearby with Greg and two other board members, arms crossed triumphantly. A rental truck from Valley Excavation was parked on the street. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, running toward them. "This is private property. You can't just destroy my dam." "Actually, we can," Diane replied, producing a document. Section 7.3 of the covenant gives the HOA right of access to remedy violations after proper notice. "You've had 3 months of notices, Mr. Reynolds." The operator continued digging, breaking through the carefully constructed layers of the dam. Water had already begun rushing through the widening gap. "You don't understand what you're doing," I pleaded. "That dam controls water flow. You're going to cause flooding downstream." "Your amateur engineering assessments don't override board decisions," Greg sneered. "We've consulted professionals." I called the police, who arrived 20 minutes later. By then, the dam was half destroyed, water gushing through at an alarming rate. The officers reviewed the HOA documents and regretfully informed me that this appeared to be a civil matter. They could not stop the demolition without a court order. My lawyer arrived shortly after, but it was too late. The dam was breached completely, the pond draining rapidly into the creek. The backhoe driver looked uncomfortable as he loaded his equipment back onto the trailer. "You'll be receiving a bill for $4,250 for the removal, plus your accumulated fines," Diane informed me with undisguised satisfaction. "I suggest you pay promptly to avoid further penalties." As they departed, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. The weather forecast had predicted 3 days of heavy rain, the first major rainfall since spring. Without the dam to regulate water flow, the creek would swell rapidly with nowhere to pool. I stood in the mud of my drained pond, raindrops beginning to patter around me, and something inside me snapped. They had destroyed my property, ignored engineering advice, and put neighbors at risk, all because of Diane's personal vendetta. I pulled out my phone and started documenting everything, taking photos of the destroyed dam, the rapidly rising creek, and the departing HOA board members. Then I called Trevor and the other concerned neighbors. "It's going to flood," I told them grimly. "Get everything valuable off your ground floors, and start recording when the water comes." Then I called the local news station. The rain fell steadily for 18 hours straight. Without my dam to create a retention area, the creek rose rapidly, spilling over its banks by nightfall. Water flowed exactly as the engineers had predicted, straight into the backyards of the downstream properties. Trevor called around midnight. "My basement has 2 feet of water already," he reported. "Martha next door is worse. Water's coming in through her back door now." The Johnsons had to evacuate to a hotel. By morning, 12 homes had significant water damage, including 3 board members' houses. The executive homes at the bottom of the community's gentle slope, including Diane's prized colonial, were hit hardest. The scene was chaos. Emergency vehicles with flashing lights, portable pumps running continuously, and residents dragging waterlogged possessions to their driveways. Notably dry, my property, now featuring an empty basin where the pond had been, performing none of its former water retention functions. A news van from Channel 8 arrived mid-morning. I had emailed them all my documentation, the engineering report's warning of flood risk, my communications with the HOA, and photos of them destroying the dam without proper permits. The young reporter was particularly interested in one detail I discovered only that morning. Diane had never filed for the county water management permit required for modifying flood control structures, so they removed a functioning dam during rainy season without proper permits. The reporter clarified, microphone in hand. "That's correct," I replied, despite being warned repeatedly about potential flooding. The camera panned to show the water-damaged homes downstream, then cut back to my destroyed dam. The segment was scheduled to air on the evening news. By afternoon, my phone was buzzing constantly. Affected neighbors wanted copies of the documentation. 2 had already called their insurance companies, who were asking pointed questions about why the HOA had removed a flood control structure without proper assessment or permits. Then came the call I'd been waiting for, the County Water Management Office. An inspector wanted to visit immediately regarding an unauthorized modification to a waterway control structure. I happily agreed, offering to provide all documentation of the HOA's actions. When the inspector arrived, he was visibly upset as he surveyed the damage. This dam was registered in our system as an approved water retention feature, he confirmed, checking his tablet. Removing it without a proper hydrological study and permits is a serious violation of county ordinances. I feigned surprise. The HOA board insisted they had consulted professionals. "Professional what?" "Certainly not hydrologists," he muttered, taking photos. "They've created a mess that's going to cost thousands to remediate, and the county will be issuing citations." Before he left, I asked if he'd be willing to provide an official statement about the dam's purpose and the impact of its removal. He agreed, promising to email it that evening. The wheels were in motion. Now I needed to ensure the HOA couldn't wriggle out of responsibility. The Channel 8 news segment aired at 6 p.m. HOA demolishes flood control structure. Neighborhood pays the price. It featured drone footage of the flooded homes, interviews with affected residents, and my documentation of the HOA's actions despite warnings. The reporter had also dug into Diane's background, discovering she owned a real estate company specializing in distressed properties. By 7 p.m., my email inbox was overflowing with messages from neighbors, some apologetic for not supporting me earlier, others furious at the board, and many requesting copies of my documentation for their insurance claims. The HOA, predictably, went on the offensive. An emergency email blast to all residents claimed I had misrepresented the situation and that my unauthorized dam had been improperly constructed, actually causing rather than preventing the flooding. They announced an emergency board meeting for the following evening. I forwarded this email directly to my lawyer, the county inspector, and the news reporter who had covered the story. Then I prepared for the meeting, gathering every document, photo, and email exchange from the past 3 months. The clubhouse was packed beyond capacity when I arrived. Diane and the board sat at their usual table, looking considerably less confident than usual. Many residents stood along the walls, some still in mud-stained clothes from cleanup efforts. Diane called the meeting to order, her voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. We've called this emergency session to address the unfortunate flooding situation and clarify some misinformation being circulated. Before she could continue, Trevor stood up. I have 16 inches of water in my finished basement because you tore down a dam that was protecting us. I want to know who's paying for that damage. A chorus of similar demands erupted from around the room. Diane banged her gavel repeatedly, trying to regain control. The board acted within its authority to remove an unauthorized structure that was affecting community drainage, she insisted. If Mr. Reynolds had complied with regulations from the beginning. I have documentation proving the dam was registered with the County Water Management Office 15 years ago, I interrupted, approaching the table with my folder. I also have the county inspector's official statement confirming that its removal without proper permits was illegal and directly caused the flooding. I distributed copies of the inspector's report to each board member, then handed additional copies to residents in the front row, who eagerly passed them back through the crowd. Furthermore, I continued, I have emails showing that I warned the board repeatedly about the flooding risk, submitted professional engineering assessments, and requested proper evaluation before removal. All were ignored. Greg's face had gone pale as he read the inspector's report. 2 other board members were whispering urgently to each other. There's also the matter of the county citations, I added. The HOA has been fined $10,000 for unauthorized modification of a waterway control structure, plus additional penalties for each affected property. A homeowner near the back shouted, who authorized this removal without checking with the county first. All eyes turned to Diane, whose composure was visibly cracking. The board acted collectively based on the information we had, she said defensively. That's not true, countered Leonard Davis, the newest board member. I was told this was a routine removal of an unauthorized landscaping feature. I never saw any engineering reports or flooding concerns. The unity of the board was fracturing before our eyes. As residents continued firing questions, Greg suddenly stood up. In light of this new information, he announced, mopping his brow, I move that we suspend all fines against Mr. Reynolds pending a full investigation. Another board member quickly seconded the motion, clearly trying to distance herself from the decision. Diane looked betrayed as the vote passed 4-1, with only her dissenting. The meeting devolved into chaos after that, with multiple residents calling for Diane's resignation and others demanding the HOA's insurance cover their damages. When one homeowner mentioned potential personal liability for board members who acted negligently, several board members abruptly left the table. As I walked out, Martha caught up with me. The tide's turned, she said with grim satisfaction. But Diane won't go down without a fight. She was right. This was just the beginning. The next morning, I received an unexpected visitor, Leonard Davis, the newest board member, standing nervously on my porch. I need to show you something, he said, glancing over his shoulder before handing me a USB drive. I never signed up for this kind of liability. The drive contained board meeting minutes that had never been distributed to residents, emails between Diane and Greg discussing my property specifically, and most damning, a text message exchange where Diane wrote, once Reynolds is foreclosed for non-payment, Advantage Realty can snap up the property at auction. Sarah will love that view. Advantage Realty was Diane's company. Sarah was her daughter. They've been targeting you from day one, Leonard confirmed. But I never thought it would lead to this disaster. Armed with this evidence, my lawyer filed suit against the HOA and board members individually for harassment, illegal property destruction, and negligence. He also contacted the district attorney's office regarding potential fraud and abuse of power. Meanwhile, 3 insurance companies had denied coverage for the flood damage, citing man-made causes not covered under natural disaster provisions. They were preparing their own suits against the HOA, whose insurance policy had insufficient coverage for the extensive damages. The local paper ran a front-page story titled "Power and Water. HOA Scandal Leaves Neighborhood Underwater," detailing the personal vendetta behind the dam removal. When reporters discovered that Greg's construction company had received the no-bid contract to remove the dam, a clear conflict of interest, public outrage intensified. The county inspector returned with colleagues from the Environmental Protection Division, who were concerned about damage to the local ecosystem. They issued additional citations for wildlife habitat destruction and water quality violations resulting from the sudden drainage. Diane finally broke her silence with a mass email announcing an emergency board election, claiming that disagreements over management approaches necessitated new leadership. She didn't mention her resignation, but it was implied. Before the election could occur, however, a court hearing was scheduled for my injunction request. I sought to prevent any further HOA actions against my property and to require them to restore the dam to its original state. In the courthouse, Diane appeared without the other board members, represented by a visibly frustrated attorney. The judge, an older woman with shrewd eyes, reviewed the documentation carefully. "Let me be clear," she said after the presentations. "The Homeowners Association removed a registered flood control structure without proper permits during rainy season, despite multiple warnings about flooding risk, resulting in significant property damage." "That is correct, Your Honor," my lawyer confirmed, "and there appears to be evidence suggesting this was part of a targeted campaign against Mr. Reynolds, possibly for personal gain." "We strongly dispute that characterization," Diane's lawyer interjected. The judge held up the text message printouts. "These messages suggest otherwise, Counselor." After briefly reviewing the county inspector's report, the judge granted my injunction and went further, ordering the HOA to immediately begin restoration of the dam under county supervision, with all costs to be covered by the HOA. Furthermore, she added, "I'm referring this matter to the county prosecutor's office for review of potential criminal charges for fraud and willful destruction of protected environmental features." Diane's face turned ashen. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed around us. I simply stated that I looked forward to the restoration of proper flood control to protect all neighborhood homes. That evening, every board member except Diane resigned via email. An emergency neighborhood meeting was called, not at the clubhouse but in Trevor's partially dry basement. Over 60 residents attended, united in their determination to completely overhaul the HOA governance. The reconstruction of my dam began immediately under county supervision, with costs billed directly to the HOA. Engineers improved upon the original design, creating an even more effective water retention system that would better protect the downstream properties. Diane resigned from the board the day after criminal investigations were announced, quickly putting her house on the market. Unsurprisingly, there were no immediate takers for a property with recent flood damage. Her daughter Sarah's dreams of owning my property dissolved as quickly as Diane's authority.